Okay, I'm interested. I've just read your book, by the way, fabulous book, and you've got this tunes and chat tour coming up.
Yeah,
It just strikes
yeah.
me they're quite intimate gigs. Do you prefer that sort of intimacy rather than the volume and bluster of a Quo gig?
I wouldn't have done it some years back, and that's kind of where we came up. I should look at the camera. Which is the camera? Is that the
Yeah,
camera?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Growing up, that going into those venues and doing, you built your way out of that. So I dare say, if I was going back in there with Quo, it's like, well, look, it's come down to kind of thing. But I went to do the talkie thing a couple of years ago. Start that. You'll have to put this back in, and I ramble a bit and go off at tangents and stuff. I began to realise I like talking, which you'll find out. And then a guy that I was do lots of interviews with over the years talked about doing a talk tour. I go and do the talk tour. I go with Mick Wall, who did the book with me. It was resoundingly successful, and it was resoundingly successful with me. I thought, I like this. And every time I see the venues, if I think of them in my mind, it's like, it's a nice, friendly thing. So when I think of where we'll go next weekend. We went over the last few shows in the summer. There's a different thing about it. It's more, more kind of thing. And you walk out and think, right. And with Quo, when you walk out, you think, right, I've got to get, and then there's this momentum. It must set up and it must get to the end. Whereas when I go and sit down with the thingy one, I would start talking about when I was a kid and what happened with my mum, how I kept falling down the stairs and why I think we started doing. And the more I did it, the more I could feel the warmth in the audience, and I was really getting to enjoy it. And then playing acoustic tracks, which I didn't want to do in the first place, that I got more and more into. And then the promoter was saying, well, why don't you do more? They'd love you to do more tunes. I go, no. And we've got to the end of that, and I'm thinking, that's why I thought, well, tunes and chat.
Yeah.
So it's more tunes, less chat. My main thing at the moment is I don't know what I'm going to be talking about.
Right.
But there is something about him, smart ass, that when he sits down, then something happens. And my manager at the time when we were doing the talk to, he said, careful, don't wander off at tangents like you do. So the worst bit of fucking advice I ever had.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that kept happening with me, there was this Jimi Hendrix story or Jimi Hendrix thing. And each day I'd do something would just bang to my mind and I would say it. One was about one of my dogs, Nancy, who stinks like frog. Anyway, and how Nancy gets itchy belly and rubs her belly on the floor. And it reminded me of Hendrix on his guitar. And I realised I was wandering. So the next night there's somewhere else to go. Now I liken that to when we've been out this summer and certain things happen in the arrangements of the songs and dynamically say that you go, oh, that tonight, afterwards that was big. That was there, wasn't it? So tomorrow night it goes to there and it goes something again, which is the whole development of Quo when it was growing up would do that. So when I go out next year, I don't know what the fuck's going to happen, other than I've got lots of nice tunes that I'm kind of interested in. They're down a tone. So your question was, once again,
do you prefer the intimacy of these sort of shows over the volume and bluster of a Quo gig?
I think it is the intimacy. I think it's the less of sheer volume behind the fucking noise, which growing up has always been, but it's, and the physical energy that you exert in a Quo show. We did one in Holland the other night. It was quite warm and extremely large tent. I think that's 6,000 people. But we came out of there like that. You think, Jesus Christ. Whereas I go and the other thing, and it's not like that. And there is still something I don't know what it is about that I like. And it makes me think, I want to do that. I get kind of. So I'm looking forward to doing. I've got the tunes ready. I'm going to work out what the chat happens. And I remember doing the chat and the talk to her and really enjoying it and realising the audience liked it. I think that's part of the, they like me, mum, they like me, you know. And without having to do, we did the tour earlier in the year. I think we started in Belfast, lovely venue in Belfast. And my studio engineer is taking them out as tour tech. my guitar tech, and he's doing the tunes with me. We went and did the sound check, and the noise was just, this is horrendous. And quite often it'll improve on the gig usually. And I started to think. I said to him, "Fucking, this is." When we did any of the talky stuff, Boomy Jang, it's a bit boomy in here today. Can I have a bit more sibilance on the microphone? Thank you. Nothing else to worry about now. When we're doing Quo, I realised we've got John's bass amp, we've got Andrew's amps, and this Hammond, the Hammond going whaley at the back. You've got Richie's 1200, my 400, into this fucking room that's designed for acoustics. And then you put it through another PA and amplify it again. Oh, Christ, why does it sound so fucking horrible? Inevitably, you get into the gig and it works, and the audience takes you along. But there is some comfort I like in it. I want to explore it a little more before I drop dead. I don't want to drop dead while I'm doing it. That would be quite. No. I just haven't got a ticket, so would it?
No, I've got my ticket as well, so I'll be disappointed.
You make me nervous, though. It does, honestly, yeah.
I mean, I'm interested. I want to take you back to the 60s, actually. I'm sure you'll love to go there. Now, you support the Small Faces in the 60s. Is some of the phasing on pictures of Matchstick Men borrowed from Itchy Park? And how close do you think Status Quo got to that Pink Floyd sound of Sunny Cellophane Skies?
Fuck me. It's a thinker. No, definitely. There's a whole thing about phasing was around in this. The only ones I remember before that were. I don't think it was Itchy. Was it Itchy Park, or what was the one you said it was of theirs? I think the reason I knew the Small Faces, they used to come up to my dad's ice cream van and buy ice cream off him. So I initially knew them young, and I got to know Kenny quite well, and we got on quite well with them. And Rick and I were going to form a band with Kenny. We did fallouts with Anna Lancaster even then. And they were there was something about the Small Faces. They were all the same size. They were small, Yeah. And I remember seeing them at, I think, Bromley Court Hotel, because I lived up there. But so I don't think the phasing was taken for that. Phasing was one of those things that was going on at the time.
Right.
And it was interesting because you recorded mono records. So you had 4-4 machine, 4-track down to another track to one of those things. So you had sub mixes going along all the time. And then I remember doing the double track vocal to a mix. So they had to get that right. And then I've done the Stout Tune guitars down there. And then the producer or the engineer, who later went to ITM, which is weird, they brought in this huge great grey thing with big black dials on it, straight out of Quatermass or something,
Right.
And the idea, what you did is you had two mixes running. So the degradation all the time of the sound was getting silly. No one worried about that. And so they ran these two machines, and this would drop the voltage. So one machine would slow down, and as it came back up in line again, you get phase cancellation, where if you get it quite right, the signal will almost disappear. Mm. And so that's what's so fascinating when we hear it, hearing phasing. It's still a lovely thing to do. So no, I don't think any of those. Sunny Cellophane Skies was Alan trying to write something the same as Matchstick Men. And that's not a criticism. That in that era, anybody did a first single, they did the second one pretty much the same. The Kinks did it, Who did it, all sorts of people. The second single, fuck it, that was a hit, we better try again. Or, yeah, we've been successful. And so the first album, Picturesque Matchstickable Messages, Alan Lancaster came up with that, had various songs that were of that ilk. So no, I didn't know anything. The only thing, we'd worked with Pink Floyd in Cambridge Corn Exchange, and they first were working with the oil wheels or whatever they were. Yeah. I was never really. I suffered with lots of migraines, so that kind of thing was set off a migraine. Yeah. And I remember we saw one on the bus the other night of Roger Waters doing something. It's really excellent stuff. But I've never really been a particularly big fan of it. I think perhaps it's a bit too deep for me or something.
But you're never a fan of that Syd Barrett stuff? All that, Syd Barrett stuff?
I found a bit weird because he was...
He was a spaceman, wasn't he?
He was a spaceman, and they did that. Someone must have said to Floyd, look, guys, you're really great and all that. you're fucking boring. You better do something. So the visual side of that thing now is still phenomenal. We watched this thing on the bus, us and them, the two young uns were watching, and it is really phenomenal. And it's very, but it's still very clever and manipulative in it, us and them. So that's very clever from Roger Waters. Yeah, it's clever that. And but you basically never see any of the fucking band, do you? It's all about the show.
Yeah.
So
I grew up being a Pink Floyd fan for years and years, not even knowing what they looked like.
Yeah, exactly. But that was sort of an anti-hero thing, wasn't it? Everybody else, it was whether Frampton was myself, Frampton. Who was the singer with the love affair? I got on well with him.
I can't remember now.
It'd kill me if I see it. A bunch of us in some magazine who was the face of the year. What? And yet they were the opposite of that stuff. Who the fuck are they? So I find it fascinating with showbiz that everything is some sort of fucking angle. Yeah. Whether it's and I thought that the other night. It's really clever, Roger. Us and them.
Yeah.
But absolutely. Fucking great show, whatever it was. And the girls. The girls doing that screaming bit in the middle. I remember Alan and Rick asking me to go into a room after we'd had a joint. Come and listen to it. Lie on this bed back, like that. Turn the lights out, and they put this piece on, and there's girls going. I think, what the fuck you two had that I haven't had? I don't get this, and I never did get that. And a singer friend of mine, Amy Winehouse, does it. Has done it for years for the Rossi Pink Floyd. But the other night, or when I was watching it, he now does two girls, and they sing the two-part harmony. That made it far more magical to me. I don't know why. But sorry, he's waffling about somebody else again. I'm fabulous. I'm fabulous. I'm fabulous. I should be doing promo for me, you know. Joke.
Actually, I mean, I think you've answered one of the questions I was going to ask you. I think you've already answered it. I was going to ask you was the formation of the Faces, did that save John Coughlin's job? Because obviously Kenny Jones shot off to do that, didn't he?
John Coughlin's job. No, the point being at that, as I said, Rick and I wanted to get away from Alan at that time. It was very early on.
Right. Even way back then. Even way back then, it was problematic.
Yeah, it's funny because Alan had this thing. He was a great bloke at times, but he had this, I suppose, short person syndrome. I've got to be careful because it's not. But he was always, if anything wasn't manly, if anything wasn't tough, he would quite often say to us in routining songs, you know, Rick, would come up in arrangement, and he'd go quiet or whatever, and say, no, why was he said, I could never face my family if we do that. What? And it went on for years, up until even when he was, you know, when we did the reunion tour, he still had this thing of somehow macho, something macho about it and tough about it. And I always remember when we used to laugh at him, and not, I don't mean in a necessarily mocking way, but he would, Rick and I'd say he could not take his shoes off without getting up on his toes. So someone told him he was short and it was a problem. He did some fabulous things. He could never, and some of his songs, 2 or 3 of his songs, I thought were fucking donkeys. No, I loved them to death. It wasn't enough for him. And sorry.
Oh, I mean, you say that, but according to the John Coughlin's biography, one of the band names that you mulled over for a while was the Queers. I bet you're glad that one didn't stick.
Barlow came to us with the Queers. He thought it needed to be contentious. The Muhammad Ali's, the Queers, various things. And we went to be Traffic, and less than a week later, Winwood had traffic. So our manager said, well, Traffic Jam. I thought, Christ, it didn't take much thinking, did it? Oh, Traffic Jam. So we were Traffic Jam. I think we had 2 or 3 singles as Traffic Jam. And we knew the name was going to change again. It was going to Quo Vadis, various other names. We said, shut up, Pat. We were routining in a gas showroom in Lambeth Walk and the basement. And he said, what about Status Quo? We said, yeah, that fucking do it. We were routining, not routining. Rick was having to learn. He was just joining it to learn the set, as it were, which he never did. The first gig he did with us, he left it unplugged because he hadn't learned it all. He was a bastard. He was a little sod. But yeah, sorry. I do
No, no. I mean,
want to.
that was a question that fed on from what you were saying about Alan Lancaster. But the one question I want to ask you actually is, you said you were pretty obsessed with the Everly Brothers. How
Yeah.
much do you think their sound, melodies, and harmonies fed into Status Quo?
I think it fed into every actor I've ever fucking seen, really. And I didn't realise how many people in my generation that really liked the Everly Brothers. We had a producer, Pip Williams, we used for a while. We called it their Smokes and Drinks. Everly, never mind. And I just, everything they do, I still listen to them. I still see documentaries about them. And when when I first met Rick, the whole idea for me and him, because I've besotted with him, and was that we would sing together. And at the beginning, that was enough for Rick. He's great. He just wanted to be, and he would sing. And he had this fabulous, pure voice. And as time went by, I began to believe the sort of PR angle. He would even say, he wouldn't say rock, he'd rock. I just said, what are you doing? What's wrong? And what's the fist for? I don't know why we all have to do that. It's rock. You're a rock band. Right? You like rock? Yeah, I love it. I don't rock. I don't understand that. And he went further and further down there, and he wanted his voice to be like that. And he had a fantastic voice. So the pair of us singing in harmony was great. As close to that sibling thing that you get when siblings sing together, or family, you know, mother and daughter, father and daughter, whatever. There's something that happens. And I thought we had that for some time, which is why it was a joy when Rick first joined the band.
Yeah. You know, I always thought it was rather, given that Vertigo were renowned for being favouring progressive artists, or artists that are more album orientated, do you think Quo were a strange signing for them?
Yeah, but we knew Brian Shepherd, our manager, knew him. Brian Shepherd used to work for Magna Carta, I think, a band Magna Carta, you remember? I think he was their tour manager or robot of some sort, but he got into that phonogram and set up Vertigo. And that's, again, a sign of the times, because he would come and see us. And Colin Johnson, who was probably the best manager we had, he doesn't know that I think that about him, but he probably was, and no, probably he was. And because he believed in it, he had that thing, and he taught us that thing of just keep going and keep building. And he said that we were in Pi, and Pi weren't really seeing what was going on. And I think he realised our deal with Pi, as many other acts, you'll see in documentaries, you're on 0.5% of the wholesale price, 0.5%. It's nearly as good as it is today, these days, with Spotify. And he was getting, Brian Shepherd would come and see us. Yeah, and after the band, he'd meet us, and we really liked him. And he'd come and see us again a few months later. Yeah. It was maybe a year or so. And it's difficult when you're older, because it seems so long when you might be 6 months. I think it was about a year. And we started to make Car Driver, I think, with these sessions. We were still under contract to somebody at Pi, you know. But it was him that believed in us, and I kind of agreed. We weren't quite musical enough or prog rock enough to be. It's funny, because I was talking to somebody else about prog rock, and they call it prog rock, not self-indulgent shit. And I don't mean shit bad necessarily. It kind of is, when you think about it. It's ultimately self-indulgent. We went from the 1 minute 45 or the 2 minutes singles, which were to the fucking point, to the longer was better. I think it's when people started smoking dope and first went to America. People came back with these hour and a half, 2 hour sets. Whereas before that, the higher up the bill you got, the shorter you did. You know, you'd end up, the Beatles, I think, never played longer than a 20-minute set. I can't remember a bit. So that was the ultimate. You played, and then everyone went to America. And I'll tell you what, man. And these solos went out fucking everything, and which when you're smoking is, wow, did you get that? And yeah, and everybody was going, I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, fucking nuts. So it is. I do find sometimes look back on all that stuff and think, you never get where it went. How did anything ever hang itself together? But it did.
Oh, were you aware of all that progressive rock going around you? I mean, I take
Yeah, well,
it.
they were, for me, my insecurity and such, and I still feel that way. Not really a good musician. I'm a bit of a strummer and wants to be the Everlys. Which, going back to what you asked me in the first place, when I go out and do tunes and chat, or when I was doing I suddenly realised one night, I'm almost back to where I wanted to be right when I was before I was successful. When I was 16, all I wanted to do was this, and I was being pushed to play lead guitar. Oh, I don't know what they're talking about, and I still have great difficulty finding. I said to Leon, the drummer, the other night, we come off, and just before then, I said, I've gone over a couple of bits that I usually fuck up. I said, so I won't fuck them up tonight. And I fucked up a few bars later and turned around and said, done it. And I said, I came off and I said, I wish I could take the bloke on stage with me who sits and plays in my bedroom when he's practicing that. He's good.
Yeah.
But the fucker who comes out on stage with me, he's definitely dreadfully insecure. He can feel the mistake coming up, and that panic goes up inside me, and my hand just goes, and so does everything in here. When I watch other guitar players, and I always think of Eric, I know it's all the same boxes and the same basic phrases in the thing. Yeah, it still sounds fucking brilliant to me, and I'm thinking, I want to become a singer, so sad to watch good love. That's me, I want to do that. So I make it to do it. Sorry.
All that progressive rock thing was just seemed just very tall, actually.
I can appreciate some of it, and I think Quo didn't get the recognition it did for in some of the tunes and stuff. The arrangements were quite interesting and quite clever, and these 2 or 3 movements where the time changes and stuff. But people could never accept and say that would, or give us any of that credit for that. For being able to do that. Some of the arrangements were kind of brilliant. I just don't think the musicianship itself was particularly clever. But it had something, it had moments, and I had to give Alan Lancaster his due there. He thought it was far greater than I think it. And I think it's very easy to get taken away with yourself. Yeah. Oh, we are wonderful. Well, no, actually, some people like us, which is the truth. And probably is the same with anybody you care to name. Yeah. X million people like them. Yeah, the other few billion don't. Oh, yeah. So I think that's right. There were some magical moments on record, though.
Yeah. Down, Down, I think, was your first #1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for minutes. That 1 minute we were #1. Yeah.
When you listen to that record, do you hear anything of the Human League's "Don't You Want Me, Baby" in that?
Someone saw that, and I thought, yeah, maybe. But I also, when I wrote Matchstick Men, I was trying to get Hey Joe, which is interesting because that's where the story in the chat show I went to that. And then later on, I was doing Paper Plane, riding on a big white butterfly, was wrap your silver in my tambourine. Hey, that's how Nick saying shit. And then doing Down, Down one night, I realised, oh fuck it, I need to get off my own song. Yeah. So Down, Down, part of it is like Matchstick Men. And you said what? Oh yeah, I've heard that. Was it Martin Russian? Yeah. Or one of somebody to do with the act was in the Quo somewhat. I happen to love their records, but I also love the Pet Shop Boys records, and I wish I fucking didn't. I'd really love to hate them. I love their records. Yeah. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about music. You know, certain things, I love that. And I don't want to because he pisses me off sometimes. So it's no telling. Sorry, mate.
I'll tell you who else has confessed to being a big Quo fan. That's John Lydon in his autobiography. Did you know that?
Well, I knew something of that because the person that took the promoter for the talk tour, then they did John. And I relate to a couple of things because my PA that comes out, the band's PA that comes out and does other stuff, we went to see him. And there was something in his story. He was asked a question about that was going on between him and he said, I thought they were my friends. And I thought that was really lovely, made me just think that aggressive front that he has, which he still has somewhat, he showed his softer side by saying, I thought they were my friends. And he subsequently got shafted by his friends. And the poor sod is still trying to work through that. So I find that kind of sad, but I kept wanting to go and meet him, and because I'd heard he liked Quo and blah, 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 blah. sometimes some things don't come about. I'm not sure if I'm glad they did or not, or whether I think I've missed an opportunity to learn something from someone. Who knows?
At what level would you consider what you're proposing to be an anti-Coke song?
You do think, don't you? You little fucking.
No, I do a lot of reading before these interviews.
There was a guy that you used to call the Cosmic Cowboy. He used to make various guitars for us. First person I knew, he made me. I said, I wanted a guitar to sound like a Telecaster when it's not plugged in. So there's no tone coloration in the pickup. So we used piezo crystals, and he made these guitars. He had made a mouse, a fly, and all sorts of things. And he would come to me some nights and then sell me a guitar when he wanted money. And I let him out, and I was in the old studio in the other house, and I was fucking angry. And something happened. I had a capo on, I went down, something like that. And in my mind, it was either something gospel or and I sort of went and played around with it and lost the anger. And I was, this is great. Yeah, I fucking like this. And the phone burst across, and he came around the following morning, and I had the basic idea of it's a very repetitive song. There's lots of things. And we leant on this counter in the kitchen, and his kids were about, and there's pandemonium going. It sounds so nice. We got proposed. It just wants to not be closed. It's basically about somebody who made an offer to me once, a female, that I just couldn't go. I couldn't do this thing. Lovely, but I couldn't go. And I'll get it right if I'm composing. That's an ego thing. I usually get it right if I'm composing, but then I might be runny nosing, which is posing, being egotistical. And we used to say runny nosing about being in Coke. That's where the Coke reference comes. But the bridge in that, the solo, we got to that, it was the bridge. It was going to be, you've got such confidence, much too much confidence. I thought, they'll know what I mean. So we had to change the thing into an instrument. Sounds like so I said, not disclosing, they were really, really faint. And the other night, as I was leaving, looks left and right and not believing. Somebody had gone, whoa, where's some of that? Don't be so sure. And just supposing we yell for them while we all do it. And then it was, to me, basically a relationship. And there were just references to sort of rhyming, slang, Coke things. He's posing, runny nosing, and posing the Coke references. So.
Sure. One Quo album, I think it's quite an important Quo album, is the Heavy Traffic record. I
agree with you.
Sorry?
I said I agree with you.
It kind of reaffirmed the Quo sound from what had just come out before it. You've kind of answered my question. Do you consider that an important album?
Interesting. I find you've got the St. Onus t-shirt on. Over the years, I've seen the Stones because they broke before Jazz and we were forming. And I remember being in Forest Hill coming out of rehearsals, and they were on at the Glen Lynn Ballroom, and there was hardly anybody there. I remember thinking that something about them all the time, and I have great admiration for Mick Jagger because of his fitness, to be honest. And but you see many acts. You have a decade where you're okay. We were in '68, and we managed to get into the next decade. That was lucky, and we survived that decade. As it went into the '80s, you can't help but things begin to change, whether it's the way things are recorded, drum sounds, something, and you feel anachronism. If you're from the previous, so you tend to go and drift with it. You forget that lots of people are alienating. And I noticed with the Stones, they did something in falsetto when the Bee Gees were doing falsetto. They did It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it. After those dickheads did rock and roll, I like it.
Yeah.
And so I found we were actually trying, and you're aware of all the negative stuff. Oh, you're the previous generation, new young generation coming on. So by the time we got to Heavy Traffic, I think I started writing with Bob again.
Yeah.
That was some of it. And there just seems to be times in our career, in various people's career, something gels and it all begins to work again somehow. And it was most enjoyable making that album, and it just had a certain thing about it. And that's when the PA that's with us now is still with us then. We changed the colour of the carpet on the stage from grey to black. We put all those trafficking signs, you know. And then we were on the stage at first gig somewhere, and she came up. She said, "Don't look right." She said, "You can't wear blue denim anymore." What? Because it clashed with the stage, and it another thing that made us identify with the previous generation, make you look, oh, look at them, you know. So all those things come along, and luckily that album, I think that might be Adele. I think there's some tracks from that coming out on a new compilation soon.
There's a new deluxe edition of Heavy Traffic coming out soon.
I love that word, deluxe. They're very 50s. It's deluxe, you know.
Well, it's a 3 CD version with loads of extra stuff on it, so that'd be worth buying.
I think that's the part of me thinks that's quite good, and part of me realises it's exploitation, and it has to be. That's what we do. We're in that commercial world. I see you sell two for the price of fucking get them. Make the collectors buy that one. Just put that on it, they'll buy it. You know, that sort of thing. And sometimes I find it enraging. Other times, because I think the content of that album that's coming, I think there's a period that with that album and a few other ones, that the band would have been given more credit had its not its profile as its perception. It keeps changing. You become, oh, they're okay, they're hip again. Oh no, they're fucking not again. As Bee Gees happened to Bee Gees and various other acts. So I know one of the reasons I've gone with that album, agreed with that album, because I think there's tracks on there that could go with an airing again. But perhaps that comes from. I often think, well, I'm 73. Where the fuck do I think I'm going? Oh, you could get to what? I could get to 74. You mean?
And that's to the fourth chord. That's another good album, I think. That's a great record.
Yes, there's a few. I think Under the Influence was a good. That was another pistol. I just got married to Eileen, and I was having these dreams about some wonderful women, and twos and threes, you know. And I would be so in the dream, sweating, thinking, "Oh no, what have I done?" Some blokes will know about this. And then wake in the morning, it wasn't true. Excellent. So I had this song about this song, and then that Under the Influence. I messed around on a piano when I was 14 at my parents' house, and I knew the melody was going to get used somewhere, and it got used then. But the whole idea that we had this, we done the album, the band were very pleased with it. Again, it was another gel point, and. For the first time I ever remember, it was in CD form. So we got the whomever department, they sent up various pictures and for the title. And we, that's quite that one. Rather than, mind you, they're all shit, we better have this one.
Yeah.
We like. So we all went for this bent fork. God, look at that. And the manager we had at the time, he didn't like that. He'd come up and said, I've got a better idea. You could do a pub tour. Under the Influence, the pub. No, Under the Influence had nothing to do with drink at all. Wow, that's no fucking good, is it? You know. And he said, "What does the folk mean?" We all went, "Don't know, but it draws you in." It's similar to the whole Floyd thing. What's that fucking mean? I don't know, but it draws you in. Al once said, "Under the Influence, two blokes on a pub sign." You know. So I think all those things affected. I remember we did it. We played in some pubs. It was hell. Apart from the first one in London, these Indian people ran it, and the food was phenomenal. So was the gig. But yeah, that was another great album. Does he waffle? Good luck. You've got to put it together.
I was reading a book written by Steve Myatt, who's written this biography of John Coughlin. Now, I asked John Coughlin about a couple of events in that book, and he couldn't remember. I thought maybe you might shed some light on them. One is that Jim Morrison saw you play and apparently said they should turn it down and quit. Is that true? And then I'm sort of thinking, when could that have happened? Because you didn't go to the States.
Something rings a bell with that, but I think it's one of those. You heard the story about the kangaroo that got up in the middle of in the road in Australia. He had a denim jacket on. People think that's true. I don't think that's true, but I've heard the statement that they should turn it down and give it up.
Well, when would that have happened? Because you didn't go to the
Perhaps
States
when
for
we were in the
73.
States. I don't think it could have happened, but perhaps when we were in the States once. I don't know. And maybe, no, I don't think that happened. It just sounds like a good story, doesn't it? It's a
It
great
does.
line. Turn it down and give it up.
Yeah, it does. The other incident is that you guys supported ZZ Top. Now, you supported ZZ Top in 75 on the Level tour. And apparently you were so good that you got bumped from the support slot because ZZ Top didn't like it. Is there any truth in that, or is that
No,
not?
no, 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 no. That wasn't ZZ Top. We got on very well with ZZ Top and still do. And they liked us, Ben. They kept saying you should come to Texas, blah, blah, blah. We really enjoyed that tour. But they learned stuff from them even then about showbiz. When there was 3,000 to 5,000 people in the hall, they would come out in just jeans and caps. When there's more than that, they would come out in the rhinestone outfits with the fabulous amps, and they would come on, woo, we're going to stay all night long, and everybody go, woo, they play a bit, woo, we're going to stay all night, play a bit. They go off at the encore, come back on and go, woo, we're going to stay all night long, they play, and they go off. Learned a bit about showbiz. We were on a tour with another band got on quite well with Aerosmith.
Okay.
And we were fifth on a bill there, and in one night in Long Beach Arena, I think, we built up the bill to about third. How those things, like, who works this shit out? I don't know. If you start in it anywhere else in the world, fifth on the bill, you're fifth on the fucking bill till the tour's finished. But we got further up the bill to third on the bill, or might have even been second. And we had a particularly good night and a particularly good response. In Long Beach.
And I bet Steven Tyler didn't like it.
No, I don't, but it was his manager, because some years later they were going to come and see us, send us a message. We were in New York, and our production manager at the time said they're coming along. Steve and the guitar player, I forget his name, Joe? No. Anyway, and he said, by the way, he said to mention he's not bringing his manager. Okay. So it was the manager that bumped us, wasn't the band. That was it could get really vicious like that in America, which wouldn't happen to you here so much. Yeah. So I think a lot of those antics that various managers did in this country, they learned over there. It fucking could be quite nasty.
Well, I heard quite a few stories of bands who supported Aerosmith who had problems. I don't know, but
we got well with them too, Steve, and who's the guitar player? Joe
Perry.
Yeah, just Joe Perry. Is it Joe Perry?
Yeah.
Yeah, got on very well with those two. Got on very well with the band, and saw Steve somewhere at some award ceremony a few years back, and it's sort of, gesturing to each other and still making reference to the fact that the manager wasn't there. So they must have been really ashamed, kind of, that you fucking do that then for. They couldn't fail. They were headliners, and it was unlikely to fail. He may have thought so, but so that was the other band. Nothing to do with ZZ. ZZ was fine. We still do stuff with ZZ occasionally, or we did do, and we were supposed to go out together in 2020. I get confused over the last 3 years. What the fuck went wrong?
I've got one more question for you. It's
I've got no more answers. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Gene Simmons of Kiss says rock is dead and the fans have killed it. Do you think he's got a point? I think he's talking about file sharing and stuff like that.
I think because if he's referring to the way, because of Spotify and whatever else, and now the artist gets for a download or a play gets a quarter of a fucking penny. I don't know what it's like. Your testicles are being squeezed, and there's no way out. I was asked to make a choir album and another album with Hannah Ricard, and I'd love to make one with Hannah, and probably like to do one with Quo. But who would like to pay for it? Because the engineer needs paying, my studio needs paying for, but band's time, there are X's on it, then there's promo and stuff. What do they think? Who's going to pay for it? It's almost going back to the mid-70s where the Germans thought the music should be free. So I don't know if Gene Simmons, it's something is dead about it. Andrew Bound said to me, well, we've had the best years of it. It was so fabulous. When you look at it,
Frank Zappa famously said that jazz isn't dead, it just smells funny.
Rock and roll definitely smells funny at the moment, or rock. I don't know. He's probably got a point. You tend to keep thinking, and lots of people. I was talking to one of my sons just before you. I talk to my sons a lot, and everyone keeps saying perhaps there'll be a format that a medium that you say, look, you buy this, but you somehow have to backtrack and to get younger people to find music as special as we found it. You can't, can you? It's too late. They go, well, they're not really interested in music. I've got a plan to go in front. What music? What? Whilst there's a few out there, the older acts. It does strike me what happens when the older acts die, and there's only a few. I suppose as far as Oasis, what happens after that? When they all die? I don't know. But that's where the hope comes, perhaps, that there'll be a new format that makes it magic, and that you possibly get younger people into. You remember going to the record shop? Have you got the new Tin Lizzy up yet? It's coming in 3 weeks, man. Do you want to put your name? Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. And you were excited about it, and you went and got it. Well, now I don't imagine anybody under 25. Maybe I got that wrong. But I'm getting excited about a piece of music that he's heard. It's just we even play intros now and heard them, don't we?
Yeah, I remember buying progressive rock albums in the 80s when prog was a dirty word. They'd hand it over to you in brown paper wrappings.
You sell it at the bar. Was it the weekend, sir? It would be nice to see something, and I think Gene Simmons that is one of those marks to make people just to get it out there, but maybe more truth in that. No one knows. It's definitely not what it was.
Yeah. Anyway, Francis, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Well, one thing before it's nice of you to say that, but this is obviously a two-way street. I wouldn't be doing it unless we thought it was good for my career, my ticket selling, and so on. So anybody that tries to tell you anything other than that is fucking lying, son.
Nevertheless, I'm glad. For whatever reason, you chose to do this. It's
it's good.
It's status quo.
Oh, don't worry. I've seen that one. Yeah, that's when I first.
I'll turn the computer around for your benefit. You see, so you can see that.
No, that's when I first began to hit the back cover. I think. Oh, that's the makeup, and so the first thing on the back page of that, I thought, oh, the rot's beginning to set here. Joke. Never mind.
Yeah, well, those lithographs were on sale at the gig. They're probably worth a fortune now, I think, because you don't see them around anymore.
Yeah,
my wife wants to know how much they're worth in case we get divorced. You see.
Well, that's Bob Young. Bob Young's just got back. He's the man to ask. He keeps hanging on to things, and I keep telling him to sell them. Much like the older generation of guitar players have got such fabulous collections. Well, the more we all keep dying off, all the value of them guitars is going to keep going down. So I always tell people get rid of it while it still has value.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Thank you so much for.
Good. I think PA's hassling me here about something. She's vicious, that girl.
All the best, Francis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Take care now.
All the best. Bye-bye.